How'd you know? All the CPS requests this week, we've been still trying to take the kids for the playground for them to get out of the house for a little bit. They don't watch TV all day. My 2-year-old is sick. It's just the saddest thing. He doesn't know what's going on. Right. It's really personal stuff. It's so bad.
Yeah. And there's no way to explain, and it's scary to them.
Sorry, basically.
No. Hey, I've been there.
What's happening? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know.
He only had it for about 12 hours. I don't know what it is. Joy's a parent.
Yep.
Yeah, it's guys. Good, how are you? Thanks. So what do you carry a certain standard at city council? Make sure.
Tim.
I get my tie on straight.
Well, and you did very, very well.
I think so. Hey, how did you spell computer?
No.
Okay.
Summary.
You wouldn't have. He's prepared. Agenda.
They're not out there.
Okay, I won't.
Come on,
Got one.
Got it.
need the packet?
I don't need the whole I've read it, but I just need the agenda.
The 27th.
I'm behind tonight. I noticed in the minutes. Welcome, everybody, to the February 27th, 2023 regular city council meeting. Item 2 on the agenda is our city clerk will now call the roll. Ms. Grossman.
Counselor Long,
Present.
Counselor McLaughlin,
Present.
Counselor Randall,
Present.
Counselor Richardson,
Present.
Counselor Runyon is absent. Mayor Mays.
Item 3 is the Pledge of Allegiance. Will everybody please stand and join me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. Item 4 is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Counselor Richardson and seconded by Counselor Long to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 5 is a presentation from the Cascade Renewable Transmission Project. Is someone here to? Oh, Carol Laughlin.
That's me. Thank you for
Okay.
having me today. I'm going to share a very brief overview of our project with you, and I'll go through it quickly. And I thought maybe you can ask questions as we go, or you can wait till the end if you have any. It's up to you.
Why don't we wait till the end, okay?
Okay, great. So I am representing the Cascade Renewable Transmission Project that's being developed by PowerBridge, an experienced underwater transmission developer, and Sun2O, a solar developer. The Cascade project is, oops, sorry, skipped a slide here. The Cascade project is an 1100 megawatt high voltage DC transmission line that will start at the Big Eddy substation here in the Dalles and extend about 100 miles west to Portland. The cable bundle consists of 2 electric cables plus a small fiber optic cable. The entire bundle will be about 14 inches wide. The project will be installed entirely underground and underwater. For most of its length, it will be buried in the sediment of the Columbia River. The project will be underground where it enters and exits the Columbia at each end, and also where it loops around the Bonneville Dam. It'll be buried in public right-of-ways on the Washington state side. So the project was designed to address the need for additional east to west transmission. As you probably know, several factors are driving the need for additional transmission capacity in Oregon, including additional transmission capacity and additional renewable energy capacity as well. The mandates in HB 2021 call for the state's large utilities to implement significant reductions in carbon emissions in a fairly short time frame. The fossil fuel generators west of the Cascades near the load centers are retiring. And we also have load growth from electrification, proliferation of data centers, and overall population growth, most of which is occurring along the I-5 corridor. So combined, these changes result in a very large need for both additional renewable energy resources, but also transmission, because while there are thousands of megawatts proposed for new renewable energy resources, most of those are located east of the Cascades, right? Because as I'm sure you know, the wind and the solar resources are the strongest east of the Cascades, and that makes the energy more cost effective than resources located west of the Cascades. And also west of the Cascades, we have a lot of high value farm land that makes it difficult in any case to develop the scale of renewable energy that's being required by the new mandates. Combine that with the fact that the current east to west transmission is fully allocated, and therefore we have a significant need for new transmission capacity. And it's very hard to site, and it takes many, many years. Projects have not been successful in the past in being developed, and so there hasn't been any consideration of these needs that we're now experiencing. So in addition to the need for transmission capacity, grid resilience is also now a major consideration due to increased risk from severe weather events and fires. So given all of these factors, it really makes sense to think about transmission options that are both geographically diverse from existing high voltage power lines and also using technology, proven technology that's less vulnerable to fire and extreme weather events. So the Cascade project satisfies, includes those features. The project would also bring direct benefits for Eastern Oregon communities. The Cascade project would create many jobs during construction, and some of which would have replicable skills for future offshore wind development, which we expect will happen, but not for probably at least 10 or 12 years from now. And by providing the needed transmission capacity, it would also stimulate many more jobs for renewable energy project development, and create, help create a higher tax basis for the region. So the Cascade project originated when a solar developer called Sun2O was frustrated by this lack of transmission and thought that an underwater line would be worth taking a look at for the Columbia. Sun2O approached PowerBridge because they had successfully developed 2 underwater lines between New Jersey and New York that had been in operation for several years. And PowerBridge is a developer, and they get approached by people interested in having them consider projects across the country on a fairly regular basis. And they say no to most of them. So when they were approached by Sun2O, they did a fairly significant amount of research and thought that this would be a good opportunity. And so to date, they've been focusing on identifying a constructible route that avoids known impediments in sensitive areas in the river. They've determined an initial route, and now we're working with the Oregon FSEC, the Energy Facility Siting Council, to finalize our notice of intent to apply for a site certificate. The NOI will be available on FSEC's website within the next few weeks. And then FSEC will organize public stakeholder meetings. And they've told us that they'll have one in the Dalles, one in Cascade Locks, and one in Portland. And we encourage everyone to attend those meetings and participate in the permitting process. The Army Corps of Engineers will be the lead permitting agency, and they will coordinate with Oregon's FSEC and actually with Washington's FSEC as well. One of the surprises to our development team was that there's not, a straight line down the middle of the Columbia that is the boundary between Washington and Oregon. So we will be in both of those states as the project proceeds down the river. And we are exiting on the Washington side in any case to circumvent Bonneville Dam. And just a couple more things I want to mention before I flip through my slides here. The project will include a community benefits plan that hasn't been defined yet, but we look forward to working with your council on coming up with some of the aspects of that plan. And the project will also be constructed under labor agreements. And we've already started talking with the labor groups about including apprenticeship opportunities and possibly supporting some pre-apprenticeship training programs in Eastern Oregon. And lastly, we are partnering with the Community Renewable Energy Association, known as CREA, to apply for several $100 million in federal DOE grant funding, which would defray a significant portion of the project cost for the benefit of Oregon ratepayers. So just quickly, this is a pretty broad look at the route summary. The interconnection point on the east end would be here at Big Eddy. And then the project would go through the Dalles, and I have a close-up of that on another slide, and proceed down the river to several miles east of the Bonneville Dam to avoid some in lieu fishing sites and other impediments in the river. And it would proceed out underground in public rights of way on the Washington side, and then re-enter the river after the town of Stevenson and proceed down the river and exit across Hayden Island, underground there, and underground through an industrial area of Portland and to the PGE's Harborton substation. So it starts at a Bonneville substation and ends at a PGE substation on the west end. These are just some of the transmission need drivers that I mentioned previously. And this slide describes the renewable energy targets that PGE and Washington we put in there as well, because they might want to acquire some of the transmission rights. They might be able to get a couple hundred megawatts, be served by a couple hundred megawatts of the project's overall 1,100 megawatt capacity. And they also have significant need for transmission assets. This slide shows how many projects are looking for transmission in BPA's queue east of the Cascades. And so there's need now, and this is the time period now, but for projects looking to interconnect and deliver power going forward, every single year, the need gets higher and higher. And 98%, over 98% of the renewable generation facilities that are seeking to be online in this time frame are located east of the Cascades on Bonneville system. This slide shows the size of the cable that will be installed in the river and an example of the cable bundle. There's two cables that are only about 6 inches in diameter, and they're bound together, as you can see in this picture, with a fiber optic control cable attached to the bundle. And they are installed very slowly underwater by the cables are coiled up on a barge that has a small underwater they call it a hydrojet cable burial machine that goes along the bottom and fluidizes several feet of the sediments. And most of the sediments stay in the channel. It's about an 18-inch wide channel that's made. And the first couple inches will rise up out of the channel, but then the rest of this fluidized sediments rise up to the sides of the channel. The cable falls in, and then those sediments fall back and cover the cable. The boat only moves a couple of miles per hour, and it would install the transmission cable in 2 annual campaigns. We've identified 2 periods within the year, winter months, where there wouldn't be interference with any of the migrations or any of the biological or resource constraints. This is a converter station One of these would be located at either end of the cable next to the two or near the two substations. They are about 5 or 6 acres. And this is a picture of one that is used for the Transbay underwater cable in San Francisco that's been operational since 2010. Since they'll be in areas where there's already energy infrastructure or in an industrial neighborhood in the Portland area, they shouldn't stand out much in their environments. They're not beautiful, but they're fairly simple. And they're fully fenced and very quiet. Don't have a lot of traffic or any other implications once they're constructed. This is the route that's being looked at within the Dalles to get from the converter station and the Big Eddy substation. The project is proposing to bury the line along Columbia View Drive, heading south to Route 197. And from there, it would go underground briefly alongside Route 30, and then on 2nd Avenue before crossing over privately owned land and going under the Union Pacific Railroad complex. Using HDD technology, the cable would be routed underneath I-84 and property owned by the Port of Dalles and Wasco County Park, and then would enter the river and proceed west. And those are the slides I've prepared for you today and the overview. Does anyone have any questions? There are a couple of appendices in the back about the 2 projects that PowerBridge owns and operates currently, and some of the challenges that they successfully met during those development and permitting processes for those 2 projects.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Laughlin? Councilor Randall?
Yes, Carol, on the western interconnection and eastern interconnection, one will connect directly to PGE and the other one to BPA. Will those converter stations be operated by PGE and BPA employees, or will those be Cascade Renewables operations?
The Cascade project is flexible on that. It really depends on what the utilities are looking for. It's really just a pipeline. And so if the utilities just want to contract for transmission capacity, that's great. If they want to run the facilities, that works too. And on the 2 projects on the East Coast, PowerBridge has different arrangements for both lines with the New York utilities. So they're flexible on that point.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I have one. What is your connection with the scenic area and the Gorge Commission, if any?
We've talked to them, and most of the project is they're not terribly concerned. Much of the project is outside of their purview because the river itself isn't included. And then where it exits in Portland, it's not part of their territory. So there's just one kind of brief spot in the Dalles. Let me see if I can get back to the right slide where the proposed route does cross over in the, it's right around here. There's some forest area where the project would be buried in a road right of way in part of their region. So we've talked to them about it and they've said, well, if you can maybe not put it there, it's a very short part of the underground route. So we'll work with them on it. And if they decide it doesn't, they may decide because you can't see it that they're, except during installation, they may decide that they're not too concerned about it, but we'll talk to them once we've really established this route.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure your contact information is available. If anyone has any further questions they'd like to ask, they can call you or email you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Item 6 on the agenda is audience participation. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject which does not later appear on the agenda. Up to 5 minutes per person will be allowed. Citizens are encouraged to ask questions with the understanding that the city can either answer the question tonight or refer that question to the appropriate staff member who will get back to you within a reasonable amount of time. If a response by the city is requested, the speaker will be referred to the city manager for further action. The issue may appear on a future meeting agenda for city council consideration. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to the city council for up to 5 minutes? And if come forward, sit down and talk directly into the microphone like I haven't been doing a very good job of. And please make sure you spell your last name for the record. So who'd like to go first?
Microphone.
Yes, please.
My name is Tracy Griffiths. That's Griffiths.
And your address.
I have,
Would you give your address too as well? Yeah.
644 Sherman Drive.
Thank you.
I also have a business downtown called Willow and Bark Boutique, 203 East 2nd Street. I am 3 blocks away from the Oregon Motor Hotel. I am very upset and angry, disappointed in this community and this city for the very reason that you are going to allow a homeless shelter at the cusp of our downtown core. Many of us here, I know this audience is full of business owners downtown. We have all invested so much time and energy and money into our businesses. We have tried to create a good downtown environment, a place for people to feel good about coming and spending money and eating at restaurants. And now you are going to bring a homeless shelter into our downtown core. This is a death sentence for the Dalles. And I will tell you this. I lived in Portland for 34 years. When Portland, once upon a time, was a great city, it is a shambles because their downtown core is inundated with homeless situations like this. This was not the place to position a homeless shelter. And you know the old saying, if you build it, they will come. Oh, you damn well bet they will come. And we are going to be overrun with a homeless population here because you know what? Hood River doesn't want it. We're going to be the dumping ground in the Columbia River Gorge for a homeless population. And if we don't put an end to this or find a new location that isn't going to disrupt our downtown core, that many of us here have fought and struggled and worked our tails off to turn around. This community, I grew up here. This community, you were one of my teachers. This community used to be thriving. We were the Hood River. We were the busy community in this gorge. This is where everybody came to shop and do their business. And we have been struggling to rebuild that environment. But this isn't going to help because you're going to see businesses close. They're going to say, forget that. I'm done. I'm done investing in this community because they never make decisions that are good for our businesses. And it's time to really step up and do the right thing. Do the right thing for your community, for your town. This is a historical community. We have historical buildings here. We have historical museums here. We have artifacts. We have history. We have generations of families. This is a slap in the face to our community and to our downtown core. And frankly, do I really want to stay here as a business owner? I have been looking at other communities to move to or to relocate or to open a second business. But do I really want to keep this one going? Because I know that there are better places out there that I will do a lot better in. But I have family here. I have friends here. And I love the Dalles, but I don't love the direction that the Dalles is going. And if you want to see another downtown Portland, you want to see another downtown Seattle, that's what you're getting when you have the Oregon Motor Hotel becoming a homeless shelter. Not to mention the strain it's going to have on our police department, the traffic accidents that are going to happen right there on that intersection of 2nd Street. I can tell you right now, it's already a quagmire. It's going to become worse. You're going to have, if it's a family shelter, where are all those little kids going to go? Do you think you're going to get a school building bond passed when this happens? You're not going to get people moving in here and investing in the Dalles if this happens. You're not going to get a school bond passed to build new schools here. I can guarantee that as well. But what I know for sure is that this is a death sentence to the Dalles if it goes through. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Before we get other speakers, I'd like to ask our Director of Community Development, Josh Chandler, to come forward and explain the permitting process or the land use issues that face with this. And a lot of things have been said about the city, and I'd like to just set the record straight. Mr. Chandler.
Thank you, Mayor Mays, Councilors, Joshua Chandler, Community Development Department. This application, I work for the city of the Dalles. So the
Excuse me, can we forego the interruptions, please? Thank you. Let's let the speaker speak and let's let this gentleman speak. Thank you.
So the project we're discussing this evening, Mid-Columbia Community Action Council's Annex project at the Oregon Motor Motel. This is a project that was approved, or it's currently in review through House Bill 3261. This is a House bill, comes from Salem. It's fairly short, but ultimately it specifically says that a city must unconditionally approve such a use if it meets 4 very few criteria. Needs to be located within an urban growth boundary, that it is. It's not designated as a heavy industrial use, that it is not, has adequate transportation access. It's in the center of town. I think we can all agree that's the case. And then the other is if it's not within a floodplain, not. Other than that, there is very little that is reviewed through this process. We process it just like every new business that comes into town. It's a proposed change of use application, so it's going from one use to the next. With this House bill, we created an ancillary document for that. So it's not only a change of use plus a wastewater survey that is submitted. It's also a document that we modeled off of the city of Bend, have the same type of application form. They've also approved 2 of these projects in the past few years. Followed that project, and it's like I said, it's ultimately there's very little review on our end, but the project meets these requirements per the House bill.
What was the number of that House bill again?
3261.
3261. It was passed by the Oregon State Legislature.
Yes.
Last year, wasn't it?
2021, I believe it is. Yep.
Okay. Does anybody on the city council have any questions for Josh before we proceed?
Briefly, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor. Josh, you said it's in review? Or
Yeah, it's currently in review. There's some additional information that needs to be provided by the applicant. Site plan is the big thing. Already calculated SDCs that will be charged for it. So we're waiting for just some additional information to be provided.
why are they allowed or apparently allowed to start work on it if it hasn't been sort of fully through review and signed off?
Well, they can, currently they could do modifications to the building without, right now they're fixing the roof. They could continue operating as a hotel and fix it. The change in use, ultimately, a CAC could turn around and operate this as a motel like it currently is. They could continue to house people in the motel, which they currently do with vouchers. So they can continue to operate it exactly how it's being operated. So for them, the transitional housing component needs to go through the change process.
So I've told I don't know, 6 or 8 people now. And I want you to confirm or correct me in this statement that the city does not get any say over this. Functionally, it's taken by the legislature out of our hands specifically, so these kind of projects can go forward, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, that's correct. The code provision specifically says that these are not to be handled as land use applications. Which is a reason that there was not a notification that occurred. Typically with land use applications, we notify the neighborhood. Quasi judicial, which is, the application type that goes to the planning commission, that's a 300-foot radius that we notify. We provided a 600-foot radius to the applicants. They've done their own. The city has not provided any notification whatsoever. It's a typical process as any business moving into a vacant storefront downtown. It'd be the same process that we.
So I guess I'm asking Ms. Griffiths and other folks here not to hear me saying we're uninterested or unconcerned. I want you to hear us saying we didn't get asked and we have no authority on this matter.
Oh, that's correct.
Any other questions for Josh? Counselor Long.
So when I reached out to you, we discussed the fact that the one tool that we do have is our nuisance ordinances and strict enforcement of those. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that is something that city council can look at.
Yeah, ultimately. I mean, it would be, nuisances that occur there they would be handled the same way a nuisance would occur with any business that.
Right. But we can also pass ordinances being specific about issues we think might pop up specific to that area, but they would be applied all over the city.
They would be applied all over the city, not specific to this development.
Correct. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Josh. If anything comes up, stand by, okay?
Okay.
Okay, would anybody else like to address the council for up to 5 minutes? Yes, ma'am. Please spell your last name and give your address and your name.
Grace Shelquist, SHELQUIST, 512 West. I just have some questions. So I understand you guys don't really have any say. Understood. So my question is this is going to be turned into basically like a tri-county homeless shelter. So Hood River, Wasco County, and Sherman County. Am I understanding this correctly?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. So right now the Dalles has 330 some odd homeless people, basically sleeping on the streets, pallet houses and whatnot. So this 58-room shelter is going to cover 3 counties. What's that going to do for the people that basically are sleeping on the streets, having shopping carts, shitting on excuse my language, crapping, and I'm cleaning up feces on sidewalks in front of our business? What is that going to do what are you guys going to do to stop this?
Well, we're doing what we can with all the homeless problem here and everywhere else. Let me just answer your question first. You mentioned 300. I think your number is way high. The latest count is below 200. Okay, well, I'm just telling you what the count says.
I understand.
Yeah.
I got that number today from somebody who works with St. Vinny's. So,
Well, St. Vincent de Paul doesn't do the official count of the houseless people in the community. So,
I understand that. But you don't work down on the streets with these people. They do.
well, Mid-Columbia Community Action, I think, works a lot more with the houseless people than St. Vincent de Paul. That's,
Sure.
look, I don't want to get into a big argument about it, but
I'm not going to
your
get into
point-
pissing
your
match
point
with
is
you
well
either. I
taken.
have valid questions, and I think all of these people here have valid questions too. Most of us down here that are here right now are business owners, usually within probably 2 to 3 blocks. We have valid questions and we deserve to have our questions answered and our concerns answered as well. So we want to know what are they going to do about the people that are sleeping on the streets right now currently? The pallet houses in Hood River, they're closing from what I've heard March 31st. This new shelter is supposed to be open roughly April. All of the Pallet House people from Hood River are going to be coming here. Sherman County is going to be coming here. People are being arrested and released at Norcor, have no way back to where they're supposed to go. We're going to be inundated with homeless people, more than we are already. So I want to know what the plan is. So what is the plan for all of these people that are going to be brought to this small community?
I think you'd have to ask that of Mid-Columbia Community Action. Okay, they have a website. I would refer you to their website. I would also, they have board meetings just like we do. And you can ask them those same questions. I will say that our police department is ready to act on any nuisances that might happen in the area. They've been very good about trying to do what we can on Pentland Street. And I think you can see the same sort of efforts here. I'm not going to defend the project. I'm just telling you what we're going to do as a city is do the best we can to address any nuisance that might come up as a result of this project.
Doesn't really answer the questions, but
What question did you have that I didn't, that we don't have the answers to all your questions because it's not our project. Okay, but I will say
but
we,
you're allowing them to come in.
No,
Well,
we're
okay,
not.
okay.
and that's the
I
same, that's
do
the same word
understand
Ms.
this.
Griffiths used, and it's not true.
You
It's not, we're not allowing,
know what, sir,
anything.
you're an elected official, okay? You don't have to speak politics to me, okay? I just want straight up answers.
okay, I'm not talking politics. I'm trying to be realistic with you. And if you can't accept that, I'm sorry. I'm not talking politics.
No, you're
I've never
speaking
done
like a
it.
politician. I want you to speak like a human being to somebody who doesn't.
I've got
who's
nothing
not a
else. I've got
politician.
nothing else to say to you if you're going to accuse me of that. So if anybody else would like to chime in, please do. I got,
My
you know, I can't,
word.
there's nothing I can say to you that's going to satisfy you. Okay?
I don't
I'm
want
not
you to
I'm not-
satisfy me. I just want answers as
I've given
Most
you
of
the,
us
I've
want
given
here.
you the answers that I know of to the best of my ability. And that is our police department and through our nuisance ordinances are going to try to address the situations that they come up. It hasn't,
Is
it
there
has,
going to be any additional nuisance ordinances more than what the city already has in place for downtown?
I for
like what-
one, sorry,
ahead.
no, you go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I for one don't think we need any more new, I think we have a nuisance ordinance that'll take care of it.
There's going to be nothing in addition to help the businesses downtown.
I can't speak for the rest of the city council. If they would like to beef up our nuisance ordinance, they can certainly suggest that. Councilor Long kind of implied that. And if there's something more that needs to be done with our nuisance ordinances, I'm sure we'll address it. I know we have nuisance ordinances that we've used in the past. I think they're adequate, but if anybody else disagrees, we can certainly beef those up.
So what are we supposed to do as business owners in the downtown sector to ensure that our businesses in the downtown area stays thriving?
There's
Is
no,
there anything that we can do in addition to what we've already been doing with kicking people out from our doorways first thing in the morning, cleaning up feces, calling, code enforcement, things like that? I mean, half the time when I leave shop downtown and I have a cash bag, I'm scared to death to walk to my car. There's been a shopping cart sitting across the street from our shop for over a week, piled high with stuff, and nobody's done anything about it. I mean, those are the things that I'm concerned about. I'm not worried about the families. I am so happy that there's going to be a place for people to be. But what I want to know is, what are you guys going to do as a city? I'm not worried about what Kenny Lapointe and his team is going to do. Because he's not worried about the people that are sleeping on the street. He's worried about people in transitional housing. So we're worried about what's going to bring in more of the bad element. Am I explaining that a little bit more clearly?
yeah, and I think I've tried to answer that question by saying that we're going to enforce our nuisance ordinances to the best of our ability with the staff and the manpower we have available. Okay. We don't know, but frankly, it hasn't opened yet, so.
That's my fear, is it's just going to be a progressive thing over the next, 6 months to a year. I'm concerned about. And that's, and I know I'm not alone in that. And,
Oh,
and it's the unknown. And it just seems like it was sprung on us. And then all of a sudden we see everybody working on the building and we don't know what's going on. So when there's, things aren't being communicated to us, there was an article written that, this was going to happen, but there was no address that was set. There was no location that was disclosed. So this is all new information to most of us. And so when we don't know what's going on, we freak out and we assume the worst.
Right.
So us as business owners, would like a little bit more communication from you guys and to be able to disclose things to us a little bit better. So there's, less of the.
Yeah, we did have a presentation 2 weeks ago. Some of the.
Right,
people
that's
here-
just
yeah.
2 weeks ago, though. I mean, this is, and I didn't even know about it. I didn't know that that presentation was going on. Yeah, so I mean, if there was a way that you guys could get this out
No,
to
I-
business owners and to communicate with us a little bit better, we would feel that you're not hiding things from us. If that makes sense.
The reason I brought up 2 weeks ago is because we were told that there would be 24/7 supervision. 2 of the rooms will be taken up by people that are on site 24/7.
Right.
There'll be overnight security. These are all things that, and that's why I brought up last week, because this was all brought up at that point. So,
Right. Understood.
Yeah, I did.
Counselor Long.
Thank you. So I wanted to say that I was also surprised. I learned about it in the same method that you did. And so I understand that there are a lot of concerns in this room, and I really appreciate everybody coming forward because that's really the only way that we can have that influence. And I think it's making a big impact. One thing I would say is that I agree with your comments about St. Vincent de Paul, knowing more about how many homeless people, and the point in time count is just a technical thing, but it's basically one day where they go around and see how many they can find. So it's very likely that they didn't find them all. And that St. Minnie's has a better idea of how many they're serving. So I get that. One thing that I would like to encourage and perhaps ask the mayor to consider would be to create a committee. And I would be happy to be the person from the city to sort of lead that with community involvement, to get the feedback and gather the questions that people have and make sure that we get specific answers. And I think that process would also put certain things on the radar of MCAC, who's running the bulk of this and has the decision-making about what kind of rules and things that they implement. And then, as I said, I did reach out to community development because I am concerned about whether or not our nuisance ordinances are going to handle this. And I would rather be proactive. I'm a huge supporter of taking care of our homeless population, but I also need to balance that with the community as well. To me, those are equal things, not one is not more important than the other. And I do feel like there are a lot of people here who do not feel heard at this point. And I would say so far, we don't have a mechanism. So I'm volunteering to create that mechanism.
That would be wonderful. And I think that's what the biggest underlying problem is right now, is that we feel left out, we feel unheard, and we don't feel that we have a voice. So that's basically what we want right now. And we would love to get something like that. Committee, I think is fantastic.
Definitely.
Mr. Mayor, may I throw a couple of
Counselor Richardson.
thoughts? And forgive me, we're kind of working without a net, thinking out loud. So just as neighbors, I grew up here, I live here, and I love my town. So I don't have it all figured out, and I may not have answers, and I don't know anybody has answers for you, but let's just share what we can share. So it was more or less a surprise, this development as of about 3 weeks ago, plus or minus. And as we've already made clear, essentially outside our say-so.
Mayor Mays.
Let Counselor Richardson finish and then.
No,
Okay.
not nearly.
Sorry.
Um,
Continue.
I think in bullet points, I'm just going to sort of think through my points here out loud a bit. So whether the population, homeless population is 250 or 330 or what number you find most accurate, is beside the point to some degree, in that there are there's lots of different homeless, right? Okay. There are people that get into that situation for different kinds of stresses, economic stresses or life circumstances or what have you. And then we know there's a core, and I don't know what the percentage is. My guess is it's pretty small, that are, I don't know what the correct terminology is, intransigent, difficult, the folks causing the problems for you on a daily basis. I talked to a business owner today that said, they close an hour early when it's this time of year so that people can get to their cars while it's still light out. And that's really not acceptable in the Dalles. It's not acceptable, but we don't have a mechanism to scoop up those people and put them somewhere. There is no somewhere to put them. So it's a tough nut. It's not been very public, but there have been I think a number or several efforts to work towards alleviating homelessness to the degree that we can. Some have been successful, some have not. I think that MCAC's operations of the pellet shelter site is encouraging, because if you go by there, it's pretty neat and orderly for essentially a homeless village. It's not a homeless village, it's a transitional housing village, right? So that's one element of that population. And so that's really the folks, to my knowledge, that we're talking about in the Oregon Motor Motel. So I don't necessarily need to carry their water, but I do have some hope that MCAC's sort of energetic management of its properties will continue and will rise to the occasion. And we can, I guess we need to be mindful or thoughtful about how do we make them successful in helping people and successful in not causing more problems. So that's an open question. How does the city help them do their good work without bringing more problems onto us? That's an open question. The answer is we need to work at it, and
It starts with communication.
it's tough. We're communicating as soon as we knew how. But anyway, I would say I think there might be a couple of levers we haven't pulled on yet very much, and that is, we have state representatives, and I don't mean to pass the buck, but they have much more money and much more authority than we do. And we have a state representative newly elected. Be nice to have him in on this conversation. We have a state senator newly elected with a business on 2nd Street. It'd be good, necessary, critical to have him in on this conversation. So I think, and I know this sounds sort of bureaucratic to people when you say, we've got a problem, you bring the city in, and some city councilor says, we need to start a committee. I know that sounds like it's brushing you aside, but it's actually how things kind of get done sometimes. It's like, it's step one. Think about it. What are the resources? What are we allowed to do? What do we have the money to do? And then act. So I think it's actually a good idea that Councillor Long has proposed. We have an informal committee that's worked with people, but we might do well to formalize it. And so I think that's probably something we need to think really hard about. So that's what I have to say about that. It's not a lot of answers, but I hear you loud and clear.
Councilor McLaughlin.
All right. Well, I do recognize many of you here as being a former student. I've been here for 49 years. I love this city, or Laura and I would not have remained for all of these years. I too was only informed recently. Many of you, I heard the rumors, but we didn't have verification until about 3 weeks ago. And since that time, we've gone through the path of discovering what we can do and what we can't do, what is within our power as a city councilman, as your representative. And fortunately or unfortunately, the state has given us direction, and we can't, legally, we must follow the course of the legislation. And so it renders us powerless, but that doesn't mean that we can't communicate with you more effectively, and we will. Because until tonight, we didn't know who we can reach out to, and you're one of the people that I will. As far as when you brought up the shopping cart issue, because I've been working on that for some time now, and you notice that it started with a community cleanup on Saturdays. Remember those? And Donnie Lewis and I went out and we collected 75 carts and we returned them. Donnie Lewis has been collecting carts every Saturday since that time. He has collected countless numbers of cards. Now, when we come back, actually, I will send it to Donnie, and I guarantee you that Donnie has been very responsive. And if I have to, I'll go myself and pick it up because,
On the corner of First and Court.
all right, we understand that taking a shopping cart off from premises is illegal.
I'm concerned about the person that was with that shopping cart because it's been there for a week. I don't know where that person went to or if that person's.
So what I just want to let you know that there is someone that's doing their best, one person that's doing their best to address that problem. We are going to look at ordinances as we move down this path. And that's one in many cities that there are electronic devices that we can put on those carts to prevent them from leaving. There are things that we can do working with the business owners, especially the grocery stores. That's predominantly where those carts are coming from. Not all, but they're being returned back when they're, the problem comes is the contents. Legally, if you remove that, it's personal property. And Donnie has been told that if there's contents, now he has dumped them out, but that puts him at risk as well. So what we don't want to do is compromise. He's doing a service to our community, keeping it clean. Maybe it's not perfect, but that's another example of what we're trying to do. And as a city council and myself personally, we're trying our best. I think we can increase the communication. I think when problems arise, that we can address those problems as we move along within the law and within what we can do as a government for city, protecting people's rights, including all of you, but including those homeless people as well. So somehow we have to find that balance. And that is what we're trying to do. Wouldn't you all agree?
Well, especially because it's a downtown. I've often been called a downtown centric person because I put so much emphasis on making the central business district all it can be. And I certainly feel very strongly we want to keep that going. So was there anything else?
No, I just want to assure everyone that we are accessible. You can find us on the website. You can call us, you can email us, you can text us. We get many emails and some are good and some are not so good, but we need to hear that because how can we respond and how can we pass information on to you? I would assure you that before you came here tonight, you didn't know about the legislation that was passed, preventing us from interfering with the progress of this development, right? You didn't know that.
No,
So
that's why I'm stressing communication and notifying us as to what's going on. We understand you guys were just made aware, a few weeks ago. Goodbye.
we crossed this path with Bridges to Change with it was a house up near the high school that we all opposed at the time, but we were informed that we could not put any resistance to that particular operation. And they went in and they opened it and they conducted themselves. And actually the community and the neighbors were all against it. But within a year or 6 months, I heard directly from people that said, they're okay. It's not that bad. So it's the anticipation that we have to work with right now. It's the unknown. And we understand that. We're feeling it the same way.
I think a lot of us are dealing with a little bit of PTSD because we've been dealing with such a problem for the past few years. So now we see, all we hear is that it's going to be a tri-county homeless shelter, and everybody's freaking out because now we, see all these homeless people coming from all these other communities, and we just feel, but we see homeless people sleeping on the streets and tents and shopping carts. We see that quadrupling. So we need communication, and we need a way to know that that's not going.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Kara, go ahead.
thank you.
This is our city attorney.
Hi. Just with specific respect to keeping open lines of communication,
And I believe the mayor himself mentioned, we,
Jonathan, could you speak up a little bit more?
yeah, you bet.
There we go. I can hear now.
Just specifically on communications. The city has these public meetings every other Monday, and we put out an agenda 10 days beforehand. And I'm confident that everybody in this room has an email address. If you'd like to see what's on the agenda for the meeting that's going to be happening in 2 weeks from today, for example, that'll be available in 4 days. And so at the last meeting 2 weeks ago, this room was filled with people that were supporting this project. And it seems like everybody here didn't get the memo that this project was being discussed 2 weeks ago. And maybe the conversation would be a lot more different if both sides of, opposition and support were in the same room, and maybe there could be some opportunities for everybody to learn more about, just like Councilor McLaughlin said, about this new House bill that was enacted last year. And so I would want to encourage all of you, because we're going to have future meetings, and there's going to be other projects that have nothing to do with homelessness, but might affect each and every one of you.
I'm new to all the city council meetings
Sure.
and the meetings, and I recently dealt with something that went through planning. I was on top of that because it was literally right across the street from my house. So I am new to all of
Sure.
this. So I now have been checking things and looking at things
Yeah.
and trying to stay on top of things. Not everybody is aware that they can do that. So
And it's so easy.
get that out, and it's not your job to get it out, and I understand that. So
It's the city's job. Sorry. It's the city's job. And specifically, it's her job. And she sets out the agenda every 2 weeks. And if you put your email address, and this applies to every other person in this room, put your email address on a little sticky, hand it to the city clerk who's sitting right there, and she'll add you to the list. And no, it's
easy.
a piece of cake,
Right.
because we're sending it out anyway. Right. But just talking about communications. And so seriously,
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
that with
absolutely.
Everybody.
in fact, I have, I'm a lawyer. I have sticky notes. I can go get some from my office behind me, and I can pass it around. Everybody can put their email in, and everybody will have an idea. She already has them out, because there's really no opportunity for the city to do anything behind closed doors. I mean, everything we do is public, everything.
I
And
can
so,
hear that, because the last few weeks, it felt like you guys were hiding things. And that's why everybody in this room has been
sure,
both. How you can best.
you bet.
I just have one quick thing to say, that one thing that I've learned through all of the years of teaching is that when we work together with a common goal of keeping our city safe, healthy, and we communicate, we stand our best chance of keeping it safe and healthy, and the place that we all want to see our city be and become. So let's work together.
Anything else you'd like to say? Okay, thank you. Anybody else like to step up and speak for up to 5 minutes? Yes, ma'am. That one right there.
Hello.
Hi.
Jennifer Gunter, Gunter.
Address?
Address undisclosed. Okay, my first question. Actually, I have a couple questions. One's going to be for Jonathan. Since you are the lawyer present for House Bill 3261, relating to conversions of property for living spaces and declaring an emergency. In that language, the way I'm understanding this to read is, property can be used under the declaration of emergency, correct?
Go ahead. I don't.
I don't understand the question.
Under House Bill 3261 in the language under Section 2, it says relating to conversions of properties for living spaces and declaring an emergency. So those properties would only be able to be used if the emergency was declared locally. Sorry, I was not very thorough on that question. And most recently, the city had declared or maybe not the city, maybe it was the county, had declared a homeless emergency, correct?
I don't know anything about what the county's declared, but to answer your question, no, that's not correct.
Okay, so under section 2, it says from use as a hotel or motel or a hotel or motel that was converted to an emergency shelter under paragraph A. So my question is, the reason I'm asking this question, it's because many of you said, well, we don't have a choice. My question is, if Wasco County or the city, I'm going to have my verbiage wrong on this, didn't declare that local emergency of homelessness, would that hotel be able to be utilized?
Are you reading the House bill itself?
Yep, I am.
Scroll down to the very last section,
Okay, which one? Section 3, 4?
whichever one's the last one.
Okay, section 4.
Sure. And what does it say? Because I don't
This-
have it in front of me.
This 2021 act being necessary for the immediate preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and emergency is declared to exist. And this 2021 act takes effect on its passage. That still is not. So what is your point of that section? I guess let me ask that.
The state of Oregon declared that homelessness is a public health emergency and
Okay.
has authorized this overriding legislation, which overrides the city's authorities under our local land use law,
Okay,
to take it completely out of the city's hands. Because the state of Oregon has determined that it is a matter of statewide importance
Mhm.
that this homelessness crisis is tended to, and they don't trust cities and counties to not do that for the reasons that everybody in this room is here for. They think that the homelessness crisis is more important than all of the concerns that are in this room.
May I ask, are you asking if the county's
but I
declaration of an emergency?
could
would
have
have-
sworn most recently in the last
Yeah,
4 weeks.
that's a separate issue, has nothing to do with this.
But that issue has to do with the funding
Right.
that goes to projects like this, correct?
That is correct.
They do work hand in hand.
Well, I don't know that, you'd have to ask the county why they passed the declaration of the emergency declaration. But you're right, by doing so, it made certain areas of the state, including this one, eligible for funding, whereas before they declared the emergency, they would not have been otherwise eligible. Is that,
But if
Yeah.
I may add, I believe the funding for what's called Operation Turnkey, which is
Yep.
the funding source for these types of conversions,
Mhm.
was already allocated. And so I believe that the Wasco County Declaration of Emergency is entirely separate from this, although it touches upon the same subject.
Right, but the funding does get used for that area, correct? Well, I can save that for another question for another time. but-
the funding for Project Turnkey came from the state.
Yes, I understand that, but I'm saying whether it comes from the state or not, it can be used for projects such as everybody's upset about here,
That is
correct?
correct, as far as I know.
That is, that would be regardless of the declaration of an emergency.
Sorry, say that
That would
again.
be regardless of a declaration of emergency from Wasco County, for example.
Well, you wouldn't be able to get that funding if you didn't declare that, right?
But the Project Turnkey was funded before that declaration occurred. So
Right, I
it's-
understand that. but The money would sit there if the declaration wasn't. It wouldn't be allocated necessarily to Wasco or City of the Dalles. However, that gets split up. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm
It's a
just,
separate funding source, but go ahead.
yeah, okay. Separate funding, got it. Works hand in hand. Okay, that was what I was wondering. It's about the very beginning of this, because it does say and/or declaring an emergency, that's why that those are able to be used. So that was my question is, if that had anything to do or dependent, and maybe that would be for the county that I need to ask, that allowed that property to be used. You're saying, no, it's strictly state, it has to be used regardless. Correct?
What has to be used?
HB 3261, any application for hotels or motels that can be used as emergency housing.
Mhm.
Who declares that emergency housing besides the state? How do you pick? Is it just, if I'm understanding correctly, it's just the application, correct? That declares it the emergency that they file it under? Maybe I should ask Brad that, right? I don't know. Maybe that's something he can answer.
Just very generally, because maybe this is, and there's a lot going on. And
Yep.
so just very generally, an applicant, and in this case, the applicant's McCack,
Mhm.
they have an option. They can go through if they want to do something using land in the city of the Dalles. Generally, just like everybody else, they can go through the local land use process.
Yes.
So they'll submit an application downstairs in the planning office. And that'll get handled through, well, it depends on what they're trying to do. It'll either be approved if it's permitted outright, which is a function of the code, or it'll go through a conditional use process. And that's typically where you'll have a public hearing and an opportunity for the public to
Yeah,
come weigh
I
in.
understand all that.
That's generally 99% of the time how it goes.
Mhm.
Now, in this 1% of the time, the state of Oregon has determined that this subject is way more important than it trusts its cities and counties to handle on their own.
Yeah, I heard that at the very
Yeah.
beginning. I got
And
that.
so the element of emergency, and there it's used a couple different times, and it has been used several different ways, really, in this conversation, is because typically when a new law is passed, and HB 3261 is a new law right at the time, there's a little bit of a delay, and so any ordinance that this council passes doesn't take effect for 30 days unless there's a declaration of an emergency,
Right.
which is to give everybody an opportunity to learn about it, so that the next day, tomorrow morning, if we pass an ordinance tonight, people aren't going to be cited for violating that ordinance if they didn't have a reason to know it existed because they weren't on the mailing list. And so get those emails into the city clerk, please. And so in this case, because there's an opportunity for anyone, it doesn't have to be Mid-Columbia Community Action Council, it could have been anyone who wanted to buy that hotel to convert it into a shelter under this state law. They can completely skirt the city's local review process, which would more traditionally involve notice to the community. And so that's why this is coming as a surprise to all of you. It was just as much a surprise to the city of the Dalles. Yeah.
You guys thought about like someday, obviously maybe not for quite a while, because state of emergencies tend to get renewed and renewed. What will happen when the state of emergency, like say it ends? And maybe you can answer this, maybe not, because that would be something that you'd have to deal with when the time comes. So when the state of emergency is over someday, what happens to the people that would be in those transitional homes, in those homeless shelters? Are they just closed? Or then does your authority as a city council come in and decide what you want to utilize those for, if you want to continue use as they have been used?
Well, it's, are you
Purely
suggesting
hypothetical.
that one day when homelessness is cured or solved or whatever, right, it's not an issue and everybody has a home,
Sure.
that somehow the city would close down the doors of this private
Well,
property?
I mean, if it wasn't so largely of a problem to where it wasn't declared an emergency anymore, let's just be realistic. Homelessness is going to be around forever. But on such a larger, grander scale, does the city then have control over what they decide to use that property for, whether they want to continue use or not?
So that's a concept that is widely understood in local land use law and planning law as a non-conforming use. And there's a whole body of law that surrounds what non-conforming uses are. It's when something used to be allowed and then the code changes and then it's no longer allowed. And so the way that works generally, and I have no idea if that would be applicable in this really interesting hypothetical.
Well, it's very straightforward. I'm saying the city then would have control if things changed and the emergency was no more.
Yeah.
You would have control whether you continued to authorize within city limits
A new shelter?
a transitional shelter or a homeless shelter.
Yeah, well, so to answer what I think your question is, if HB 3261 wasn't in existence, then the use of land in the city of the Dalles is regulated by the city of the Dalles. Yeah. That's right.
That's it.
Sure.
Thank you. Anyone else? Next. Yes, ma'am.
Sierra Wright, WRIGHT, address undisclosed, but I do live here in the Dalles. Like you, Chancellor or Councillor Richardson, I also speak in bullet points, so I'm going to try and get through my bullet points and make this short and sweet. I'm a resident of the Dalles, born and raised. lived here all my life, with the exception of a couple of years for college. And I love this town. I love to see the growth that's happened in the last few years, especially through people moving into this area and breathing life into our vacant buildings, buying buildings, bringing new businesses, bringing new jobs, bringing creativity, bringing life to our downtown area. It's wonderful to see. And I share a lot of the same feelings as Tracy in my fears of what will come with this project. I also feel a strong need to have transitional housing. I think there is a need there. It is an emergency. It is something to be addressed. I am not questioning that at all. My issue is the location. I've learned a lot being here tonight, hearing people speak, hearing Josh speak about the project, and to know that there's still a permit that hasn't been approved makes me feel like there's some action that can be taken. There's something we can do. There's something that can be addressed. As a resident, communication failed. I did not know anything about this project until some business owner friends of mine told me what was going on. So thank you for standing up and acknowledging this issue and a communication breakdown and being willing to help with that. But talk is cheap. I want action. I understand you do not have jurisdiction over this issue. Totally understand that. But who does? Who do we have to go to get some action on this? Who do we have to go to ask questions? Change the location. I think that would please a lot of people in this room, and a lot of people who don't even know about this issue. Because once something is built, it's hard to undo it. Change the location to another area in the Dalles that's not the gateway to our thriving community and our thriving downtown. That's pretty much it for me.
Thank you.
The answer to that question is Mid-Columbia Community Action Council. Since she asked.
Anybody else? Did you hear that? Yeah, okay. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Nicole Chasen. I'm at 7250 Mill Creek Road in the Dalles. I'm a parent. I am not in city limits, but I do spend 5 days a week downtown. I'm supporting the small business owners downtown when I come. I've also spent 2 summers, a few days a week in front of the post office, registering people to vote and gathering signatures for various initiative petitions. I've also volunteered for community cleanups, and the downtown and its current issues are not known to. I'm going to give you a few statistics. Multnomah County themselves. Yeah, we're not Portland. But judging by how bad things have gotten in the last 3 years, per capita, we might be pretty close. And kudos to the county getting these statistics. Has MCAC provided such info? That's our own county. That's our own city. 69% of houseless in Portland were homeless when they showed up there. They are called destination houseless. Will the annex and pallet houses be used for destination houseless? 80% of the houseless in Portland are addicted to drugs. Staying your dry living does not count if you ask the houseless to leave the site to use drugs, as is the way with the current pallet houses under MCAC. Wouldn't it be more sense to invest in tox, drug, and mental health? You know, with Measure 110, having 40 fentanyl pills is not a crime. This is considered personal use. How is MCAC going to police this? Drug tests, room checks? How many of the Dalles houseless are couch surfing, living in cars, but still make it to work? Is that what the annex is for? There are many stories of employees that cannot get help from MCAC when leaving a dangerous situation because they make too much or have too many assets. There are even stories of local business owners that stayed open during COVID at the disappointment of the city and state to support employees that were houseless. This is the way. Support those that are productive members of society and just need a hand up, not a hand out. Is the zoning correct for the annex? According to House Bill, the city employee Josh explained no notification was needed. Why didn't neighboring businesses and residents receive notification from MCAC? Which is normal for such things. What are the qualifications for being a resident of the annex? What is the plan if the annex fails to stay full? Will the qualifications change? Will the qualifications be revisited? What will happen if MCAC cannot afford to run these endeavors? Will this impact our property taxes? Will the city or county take over supervision? Why are we taking house lists from Sherman and Hood River County? As was said before, the pallet houses in Hood River are closing March 31st. The annex is opening in April. Does that make sense? Basically, you've managed to agree to help increase the growth of the Dalles population faster than any other governing council through accepting people from all surrounding counties without bringing industry or other long-term employment. Thank you for listening to me. I don't expect you to answer these questions now, but wanted to make you think. All business owners have enough problems. We need to support them. I'll be sending out as an email backed by articles the statistics I've quoted. HB 3261 must give permission to the land use no matter what. You could use sanctuary laws to sign an ordinance that you as a city will not accept this. Their cities have done it. It set limitations, questions as elected city, mayor, and councilors to what MCAC's plans are. Nuisance ordinances are a waste, as our current DA, Matt Ellis, will follow the lead of Portland's DA, Mike Schmidt, and keep the revolving door open. Camping on public and private and city limits should be banned. Panhandling should be banned. Running down 6th Street naked while being chased by 3 police officers is not okay. Stealing shopping carts is not okay. Wood River Walmart just spent $40,000 to replace shopping carts. That cost is absorbed by us. We expect MCAC, and I'm only using that as a statistic because I'll go talk to Fred Meyer and I'll come back with you with how much they've had to replace. We expect MCAC to offer money to clean human feces, return shopping carts, clean the watershed of Mill Creek, clean graffiti. Would they be responsible if they are the wards of these people? Portland is currently being sued by disabled people due to their situation. I don't want to see the Dalles be sued. A representative and our senator are minority in Salem. We all know it. It's because HB 3261 passed. Our county received $5 million of pandemic money to open a navigation center, which included space for MCAC among these wraparound services. What was your involvement with that? And I just want you to answer the last question. The rest I'll send out. Was City Council involved with that decision of the $5 million coming from pandemic money that Senator Lynn Finley secured while this navigation center is going to be in city limits? Is that new information to you?
Not to me. I mean, the city of the Dalles contributed money toward the navigation center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And MCAC had a seat at the table there, and now MCAC has a seat in downtown the Dalles. You guys are all complicit in this happening.
Anybody else like to address the city council? Last call. Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but we'll be reconvening at, let's make it 8 minutes, at 5 minutes to 7. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Why do we put ourselves through that?
It's a pointless question.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Matthew, is he listening?
Annie?
Yeah.
I guess it's.
Investing in.
My cousin calling him.
It was
just,
It's like a phone deputy. It's like you would say. I was.
Sounds like fun.
And Archie's.
That's why I texted Marcus. I said, thanks for coming, Marcus. So much fun. He goes, I forgot my pitchfork. And told him we keep spares in the basement.
Not the problematic, whatever, yeah. Let's still be there.
What else is on?
We should, well, I mean, we should take a crack at that.
We should, I'm just meeting with her on Wednesday. I'll talk to him.
They teach civics at the Dallas High School. I almost literally mentioned the local government academy that's coming up. I didn't want to like.
Yeah.
Really rub it in.
I don't mean.
These 10-minute songs.
And,
Really good. One. I like it.
That's what I think. We don't have a lot on our side.
Exactly.
I mean,
This goes past the.
they have rights. Try and like.
There's only 2 items.
Yeah, I know. We got.
And it may need to be done, but. We're not gonna be able to do it.
Yeah.
the court reports. Here we are. It's like, look at our.
What-
We
We have an executive meeting after this.
Can appreciate that.
We went to the land use.
Might have pencil.
Was a house call. Yeah. It was the same process. It was a super site.
Being used as traditional.
It's the, nice job.
Yeah.
Did the siding for the navigation center was the same as for this?
It went through just
Yeah.
a building permit process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Approval wasn't official use.
Oh.
It's a plan commission, right?
No.
Josh, you're going to order a replacement just directly like the old one. So, won't be any.
It's called, I'm trying to, I'm like, I
The
know.
new ones are a little bit higher definition
Trying to
than the
write,
old ones.
and then I
That's
had
the
a
only
pen.
improvement, but that really doesn't change.
So I'm like, okay. I'm like, nope, that's not. what it said. That's
Necessary.
what
I
they
mean,
meant.
that's why we have. city
Moving
council,
ahead on that one.
is to hear
Couldn't.
concerns.
oh.
There's enough. They're putting in, they're gonna weld the bolts. And they're going to put in the type of,
I sure do.
they just put
put it at the
regular
bottom of this.
X bolts. And they can undo them. The new ones are gonna have the non, where you have to have a special tool
Stuff like
to get it off.
Dominoes.
And then we're gonna look at putting plexiglass protected to avoid bottles coming in. So
Gonna enforce the 5 minutes.
it's happening there.
Oh, no, I think. we'll get out of there. Anything you need to see more speakers. When did it all happen?
January.
Oh,
Have a picture of the guy taking it. Yeah? No. Chances no, they tracked. He was on foot.
yeah.
He went down 10th towards the
and-
bridge. And
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if he got into a car and took off. It was at
She had a
like
really
4 o'clock in the morning. And when there was any traffic, he would just come off the hill and sink down into the bushes. And he'd get back up. He cut the electronics.
I don't know. You're actually.
So,
Wish they had their own navigation center.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
well, can you go to take the senior citizen community board? Well, you must have thought it must have some marketable. I don't know.
It just picks that all up.
All right,
Mhm.
well. Gonna let the shopping cart, I keep bringing that up. And. All right, I will get down there if I have to go down myself and pick it up tomorrow.
Still, I still have a list of new.
I don't think.
Admire. I'm and one more, just to have a conversation about, hey, you must be dealing with this everywhere.
They're not even paying Don. I mean, Don is he's cleaning them up and bringing them back and dropping them off.
Wow.
How much better can,
RC.
and there'll be a day that Donnie won't do it any longer. So then we have an ordinance that was developed by an officer and I have it and I've updated it. So we have it. It's one of those things that you look at the priorities.
Wednesday,
Goals.
the whole day is not good.
Had priorities because we were addressing that issue with
I can,
Donnie picking them up. So it kind of went down. Well, I don't see it as.
Can understand
They still do.
If
but it's
possible, I would like
crap
to
that's
move it
inside
off
of it.
full day so I could go to Portland, but,
We don't have a response for that.
Okay,
We'll get it.
Friday.
Interlands and not be noticed and not come from.
yes.
Now it's like 4 of these. Like, wait, that's not subtle, guys. Now it's-
Kano's, that's all right.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
1 o'clock Friday, right?
Yeah.
Actually, the reason I wanted to talk to you was all about the home.
Really? Okay.
It's a general discussion.
Mhm. Sure, general discussion.
Well, not really. Or.
When we go into executive session.
I have not had to
go into,
crap on my. I have
I've
to
got
do
my
that.
foster youth and staying here.
Well, sorry.
I told Isetta
If you're like, oh, and we're gonna bring another 100.
I have to keep eyeball on it.
Well, you're.
I'm willing to make an exception, but you want me to bring it up?
If you guys are okay with that, he doesn't understand anything. 14, but Matthew's 5.
They have a.
Not having it, so
It's not gonna leak things to the union, is it?
he doesn't even understand. what we're talking about.
Ready to roll here?
The same thing. We should.
Give it to people. If I get emails, I'll know.
Guys ready? You guys ready to roll? I didn't want to enforce the 5-minute thing. It's too emotional.
Sorry, next time. He's up here. I'm standing up.
She's over there.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, we're going to reconvene here and we'll move on to item 7. Oh, anybody else that wants to speak to the city council? Ask. Yeah, Ben, come on up.
Good evening. My name is Ben Ring and I live at 3443 Columbia View Drive. And
It's spelled WRING.
WRING. I want to make a suggestion for the city council to consider that. I read through the project turnkey report back to the state. And one of the biggest lessons learned that they had in that report was that they had a significant lack of community outreach and communication prior to the projects taking place. And I think it was really frustrating to find out about this after the fact.
Yeah.
Find out that in my research since the last city council meeting, I discovered that our city manager and other members of the city knew about this dating back to November. That was the time to allow the businesses to be notified, I think. Especially like after the sale, the property transitions and things like that. I think that that's very important to outreach, especially to the downtown businesses along 2nd and 3rd Street, even 4th Street. We've all spent a lot of time and money and effort to update, bring a new new projects, new businesses and things like that downtown. Myself included, the small business owner. And it was very upsetting to, sort of be surprised by this. And I think that's probably what you've seen over the last few days and weeks is that I don't think there's people that don't support the idea of housing the homeless and helping. I think that is an issue. I think we all believe it is, see that it's an issue. But I think that further outreach and transparency and communication and things like that is massively important. It was a big misstep this go around. I would hope that in the future we can do that, and maybe there's a progress and something that we can learn from this.
Thank you. As long as we're talking about outreach and I wish I'd have announced this earlier, but there'll be plenty of time to get it out. Is that on Monday night, April 3rd, the sheriff's office is sponsoring a homeless town hall at the Discovery Center at 5:30. So maybe Ben, you and Annie can help
Yeah, it'd
spread
be
the
great.
word, and we'll certainly get the word out on that. Okay,
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
thank you. I should have announced that earlier. Okay, anybody else? Last call. Okay, we'll move to item 7, the city manager's report. Mr. Cleaves.
So a couple items for the council this morning. I wanted to let the council know that we received the contract documents for the Safe Routes to School application. And so for that is for street and sidewalk improvements along 10th Street over on the west side. And I intend to move forward and sign those documents. The council may recall that we had to work with, or we pleasantly worked with D21 to come up for the match for that program. And so it'll be a $200,000 contribution from D21 and a $200,000 contribution from the city of the Dalles to meet the match requirement. And then we can move forward with that grant. I also had an interesting meeting last week. There's been some efforts with Senator Gorsuch, if I'm pronouncing the last name correctly there, and some interest in returning a Pioneer Amtrak line to the Gorge. And I'll let Councilor Long speak more to that after my report. I also wanted to update the council that we have shifted the cruise ship liaison duties from the Dalles Main Street back in-house to the city. And we have the city clerk as well as my executive assistant fulfilling those roles and duties. As the council may know, and we've gotten some comments from the community that there's been a reduction in the total cruise dockings with some of the cruise lines, most notably the American cruise lines. This is to mitigate some of the COVID-19 impacts that they've been dealing with over the past couple of years, as well as in response to feedback from their passengers that they want more river cruising time. And so we want to learn a little bit more about that, have more conversations with them. And so we're working to set up kind of the initial meet and greet with myself as the new city manager and representatives from the American Cruise Lines to build that relationship and also learn a little bit more about what they might have planned and what future seasons may look like. Wanted to provide a brief update. Councilor Runyon, who's not here tonight, made a comment about a little bit more detail from Q-Life. And so Q-Life, as the council knows, is an intergovernmental agency created between the city of the Dalles and Wasco County, as well as some of our local partners, such as our area hospital. It works to build fiber in our community and improve the access and costs that our constituents have. We recently had to transition from one of our engineer consultants to another over the last few months. So things have been slowed down a little bit rocky, but we've been able to work through that transition. And I hope to see things pick back up in the coming months, as well as having more of a strategic planning conversation as part of our budget process this coming year to kind of talk about what Q-Life has done, what it should be continuing to do, and what that overarching mission is. Q-Life's been around for a little over 20 years, I think. And so it's good to have those conversations from time to time. And then finally, this is going to be a very busy week because there are several congressionally directed spending requests in the works, both on this side of the river and in Washington state. And the deadlines for those CDS or congressionally directed spending requests for the Washington side are late tomorrow, and on the Oregon side at the end of the week. And so there's a couple of projects that are going to be submitted by our partner agencies that we've received letters of support requests for. The first I wanted to mention is the Columbia Gorge Community College. They'll be submitting a CDS request for equipment to support their aviation maintenance training program. And as the council knows, it's planned or hoped that that program will be over at the Columbia Gorge Regional Airport. and inside a hangar that the city and Clickitat County will build using in part EDA funds. And so Clickitat County has really spearheaded this EDA application. It was submitted a couple of years ago and was relatively recently awarded for approximately 2.8 million. And the city and the county are each going to contribute 350,000 to come up with the required match. But in between the date of submission and when we were awarded the funds, which took a couple of years, the project costs have ballooned to about 5.8 million from an original 3.5. And so we also intend to have the city submit a congressionally directed spending request to help fill this gap with support of Clickitat County, and also keeping in mind the specific funding avenues or line items that we can make these requests in, because as the council also knows, is a very concentrated effort to get funding support for the bridge replacements that are needed throughout the gorge. And so we want to be mindful of making our request and remain as supportive as we can for those other developments and not compete directly if at all possible. We'll also receive the requests for letters of support for the bridges, as I mentioned, as well as for another project with Mid-Columbia Housing and a multifamily housing development that they're pursuing. I'm still learning more details about that project, and we'll work on that later this week, again, with that deadline coming up of this Friday for these CDS requests. So there'll be a number of letters of support that we'll be drafting, either from myself or from the mayor, as well as our own CDS request for the EDA training hangar and over at the Columbia Gorge Regional Airport. And those are my updates.
Okay, thank you. Item 8 is city council reports. Since you mentioned the Amtrak meeting and Councilor Long was present there and I think would like to have to say a few words, we'll start with her. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yes, so I was present for that meeting. It was a conference call with Oregon Senator Chris Gorsuch, who is the chair of the Transportation Committee or co-chair, and that was on Friday, February 24th. He's sponsoring Senate Bill 14, which the title is Relating to Passenger Rail Service, which really doesn't say anything at all. So what it does is it requires the Department of Transportation to study options for expanding passenger rail service in Oregon, specifically to reinstate the retired Amtrak Pioneer line between Portland and Boise and on to Salt Lake City, Utah. Some of you may remember that ran here until the 70s, and then it was retired, and they are looking to reinstate that. That request has already been made to the federal government by the region last fall, and now they are asking us to join in. The Transportation Committee will be having a meeting soliciting testimony that's been moved to May, and I don't have the new date yet. So if you're interested in that, they're looking for testimony either written via Zoom or in person. And then other than that, I did just want to say to the city manager, when you meet with the cruise ships, I think it would be valuable to bring up the discussion about what has been going on by St. Vinny's and the meal site with the courthouse and the other things there, because I still have concerns that they may be looking at other stops because that is not going very well.
Councilor McLaughlin.
Last Tuesday, I attended Airport Commission meeting, and at that meeting, we discussed, previous meetings, positive audit results. So that's good news for our airport. Fuel sales are up and continuing to be up, and future planning for expansion of hangars have been discussed. And so things are looking bright for our airport. The senior center staff, I've been working with them in conjunction with their maintenance to replace the stolen LED outdoor display. I've been working with them directly to provide them with some options, and they're moving forward on that. I've been responding to constituents, both positive and negative, on this issue. I haven't heard very much negativity until tonight, and I'm certain tomorrow I'll be hearing much more. That is pretty much it for me.
Thank you. Councilor Richardson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I feel like I've already used my 5 minutes, but very briefly, attended an urban renewal meeting that Councilor Lawn chaired last week. Have had,
I did too. Thank you.
thank you, and Councilor McLaughlin was in attendance. Have made an effort and I think successfully replied to all the emails. I don't know if that's foolishness or just the energy of youth, but I do try to do that. And I will say, because I believe I'm supposed to give reports if I have not talked to anyone individually, our Climate Resilience Committee is making swift progress. We have a draft report, or will have a draft report very soon. So that'll be coming along this spring. And if anybody wants a preview of that, feel free to reach out. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the 21st, I attended a Q Life meeting, and thank you to the city manager for providing the details that I'm not prepared to provide tonight. I met on the 25th with the mayor and also answered several emails regarding the annex. And unlike tonight's feedback, they were all supportive of the project. That's all I have.
Thank you.
And I reclaim just 1 second. I said that we'll be hearing from constituents, but my request is that we're not called idiots, we're not called names, we're not, profanity is not acceptable. For those that want a response, if you do that, I won't return a response because it's just communicate with us in a positive way and we'll do our best to get back you in an honest way. But we're not paid enough to take abuse. So.
Well said, Counselor. Okay, I gave a presentation to the Dalles Lions Club on February 14th. And I also met with Beatrice Lynch at Safe Space in Hood River on the 15th and got a tour of their new facility. And I was on coffee break with Al Wynn, KODL, on February 21st. Item 9, consent agenda. Items of a routine and non-controversial nature are placed on the consent agenda to allow the city council to spend its time and energy on the more important items and issues. Any councilor may request an item be pulled from the consent agenda and be considered separately. Items pulled from the consent agenda will be placed on the agenda at the end of the action items section. Tonight, we have 2 items on the consent agenda. First is the approval of the February 13th regular city council meeting minutes. And secondly is a request to surplus a copy machine in the community development department. Or is there any questions or discussion on the consent agenda? Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
And McLaughlin will second.
It's been moved by Councilor Randall and seconded by Councilor McLaughlin to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you very much. Item 10A. We're going to consider renewing a contract between the City of the Dalles and TAC Aero. Mr. Renard. Good evening.
Amazingly enough, it's been 5 years since TAC Aero, who is now named Hood, they've renamed themselves as Hood Aero. Been 5 years since they've taken over as our FBO at the airport, and time for their contract renewal or an extension built into the original contract. I believe you guys have that in your packet. Copy with me up here. Existing contract expired on January 22nd. We had a letter of intent from TAC Aero at that point stating that they wanted to continue with the attorney's assistance and city manager's assistance. We modified the lease to match their new name of Hood Aero, Hood Tech Corp Aero, doing business as Hood Aero, and increase the lease rate for the 2.6% increase that we put with all of our other leases. This action, as well as when the original contract was in place, we had a fuel flowage fee for every gallon of fuel flowed on the airport. They paid tiered program anywhere from 5 to 7 cents a gallon for each of those gallons flowed. It'll now just be a flat 10 cents per gallon that every gallon. And that builds us a reserve at the airport for maintenance on the fuel systems, for any bits and pieces needed for that. The branding, I touched that. Really, the budget implication is we'll have an increased amount on the flowage fee and just a 2.6% increase on their rental rate, or lease rate. Facility. I would move. Not sure how I read that, but
Staff recommendation.
staff recommendations move to authorize staff to renew the contract between Hood Tech Corp Aero, PA Hood Aero, City of the Dalles, Click-Tack County.
Mr. Mayor,
But Mr. Kara and then Mr. Cleaves.
We're gonna say the same.
Okay.
more than likely. Hi, Jeff. I heard you say staff's recommendation. This is coming from the airport. And so the city's council and the county's board of county commissioners each have about 3 board members on the airport board. What is their recommendation?
The airport board recommended be approved.
Right. They did, but they also recommended some changes at the meeting.
Those
And so
changes-
those changes are not reflected in the packet because the packet was provided to council before the meeting. And so the changes are relatively minor, and I'm happy to go over them very briefly for the council to the degree that they are important and worth mentioning. Yeah, but only because the council wasn't at the meeting, so they don't know. And so, and you know, going off of memory, and I just spoke about this with the city manager for this meeting, there were three separate modifications proposed by the airport board who did recommend this city council and the county board of county commissioners enter into this lease. And those changes included revising the definition of the term premises in the lease to remove reference to the upstairs of the main terminal building, which has been used and will continue to be used for the office of the airport manager. So that is no longer going to be covered by the definition of the term premises in this lease. The other recommended change by the airport board involved removing some old language connected with an annual checkup on or an annual audit of the fuel. That language was a remnant of the previous iteration of this lease and really has no applicability to the revised flow structure at 10 cents per gallon flat rate. And so that is a recommendation. That's their second recommendation from the airport board. And the third was to incorporate a new exhibit, revising the currently attached Exhibit A by removing reference to an older maintenance hangar. And those are the changes that the airport board recommended. And so their recommendation that council enter this agreement is contingent on those changes being made. Having vetted those changes, the city manager and I spoke about what those implications are. And I think I speak for both of us when I say we support those changes being made and would endorse the board's recommendation that the council consider those in its approval of this lease.
Concur.
May I, Mr. Mayor? Is it appropriate time to ask a question?
Yes, it is. I was going to ask, but you go ahead first.
Jeff, do you have any problems running the airport with the recently outlined changes to the contract?
None.
My question is, is the staff recommending we pass this agreement without the change, with seeing the changes in writing? Or?
Yes, but with the understanding that they will be in substance as I describe them on the record.
Okay. Well,
Which was my error in that I made the assumption that they were already in writing.
It's no error. It's no error. I mean, those were changes that were made at, at the meeting last week. So it's all good.
Now, the way you describe these changes, I don't think I'm being presumptuous to say that these aren't exactly earth-shattering changes. These are administrative
Housekeeping.
housekeeping.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Counselor McLaughlin.
Yes, I just put those words in your mouth.
Fair enough. Councilor McLaughlin, for what it's worth, is appointed to the airport
Well, I
board
was
as well. That's right.
Okay, I guess we're looking for a motion to authorize staff to renew the contract with the three changes as described by the city attorney relating to definition of premises, an annual audit of the fuel, and a new exhibit depicting the maintenance hangar. Is that-
Removing reference to the old maintenance hangar in the new exhibit, right?
Okay, if anybody wants to try to craft a motion out of that,
As amended.
yeah, as amended should suffice.
That's something I say, or is that something?
That's something they say.
Do it.
Counselor Long,
I move to authorize staff to renew the contract between Hood Tech Corp Aero Inc., DBA Hood Aero, and the City of the Dalles and Clickitat County as amended by this city attorney on the record.
is there a second?
Laughlin will second.
It's been moved by Counselor Long and seconded by Counselor McLaughlin to approve, to renew the contract with Tech Aero as amended. Is there any more discussion other than,
Mr. Anderson.
any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 10B. Consideration to extend a contract with Aviation Management Services. Mr. Cleaves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Similar to the FBO item that you just had before you, we're looking to extend or use a provision within our existing contract with Airport Management Agreement. Aviation Management Services to extend that contract an additional 3 years. We've had some just slightly small revisions to the contract, extending that to April 30th, 2026, as well as increasing the contractual payment that we have with them and adding a 2.6% increase each year. The airport board did consider this amendment and moved it forward with recommendation for approval. And Clickitat County Commission was able to hear and make a decision on this amendment a bit earlier than we anticipated, and they have already approved it. And so staff is looking for authorization from the council to execute this third amendment to the Airport Management Agreement with Aviation Management Services and move forward with keeping our current manager in place.
Questions for Mr. Cleaves? Any discussion? Would anybody like to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to authorize the city manager to execute the third amendment to Airport Management Agreement with Aviation Management Services LLC and its Exhibit B as presented, contingent upon approval from the Clickitat County Commission.
Is there a second?
Second the motion.
Oh, wait.
Give it to Counselor Richardson, and it was moved by Counselor Randall to
There you go.
approve the contract with Aviation Management Services. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. City Council of the City of the Dalles will now meet in executive session in accordance with ORS 192.6602D to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations. Representatives of the news media will not be allowed to attend the executive session concerning labor negotiations. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open session and welcome the audience back into the meeting. And with that, we'll go into executive session. Thank you all very much for coming.